Hello everyone. So this is a short video in which we are going to basically storyboard you on our module of modern Indian history. So when I say storyboard, my purpose is that by means of a story, the story of the British in India. Modern history is nothing but it's the Britishers who came as traders, created this political empire. How did this happen? Why did this happen? All those things. And what was its impact? So that we are going to briefly discuss. So you'll know, okay, fine, this topic is there, this topic is there, this topic is there. And all of this, whenever you're studying it, it will make sense to you. So that is the purpose. So as I said, the modern Indian history is basically the story of the British in India who came to a country from who were basically traders. The East India Company was there, which was created via a charter of the British Crown. So British created a company to trade with India. That's all, as simple as that. So they started trading, but gradually they create their own empire. They became a political entity. In fact, the British Parliament forbade them from trading. Okay. So the first chapter on the module is actually talking about this. How did this happen? Not really the entire journey, but how did this happen? How did this transformation actually took place? What all events were there? So, till Plasi, we are going to cover this. So we are going to learn in the first topic, that is the emergence of the British in India. So British by means of East India Company, its conflict with the other European powers, be it the Portuguese, be it the French, the Dutch, the Carnatic Wars. So all of this will be sub-chapters under the heading of the emergence of British in India. Eventually, the British got into a conflict with the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, and defeated them. A powerful person defeated by the British. So they were defeated, and suddenly there was a creation. They didn't realize this, but they were in charge of a massive empire of the Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha region. Right. So this is the kind of the first unit of your modern history. The political entity. Okay. Now British Parliament, they realized, man, something has to be done to regulate this company. This company is no longer a trading company. It is trading also, but it is discharging certain political functions. There are some wrongdoings happening in the company that they controlling this region. There is news of famines and all those things. We have to regulate this. So next thing comes the regulation of the company, right? So we heard about the Regulating Act 1773, the Pitt's India Act, then gradually the Charter Acts, all of that. British making some laws and defining what this company would be doing, the company in India. So the regulation of the affairs of the company. Besides this, when they were controlling this region, naturally the Britishers, who were basically a company, they realized, man, we have to have some administrative setup. We have to have some set of rule of law. Because if that is not there, there will be chaos. There will be bandits. We will not be able to rule. So they created their own system of administration. Initially, they adopted the system of the Nawab, but gradually they had to refine that. And they started to bring in the British traditions into India. So gradually the system of courts changed. There was the concept of separation of powers. There was the conception of rule of law. So all of this started to take place. So you see, that is why many a times we call this as modern India history. Because a significant transition had taken place in the administrative setup. what was being implemented here gradually when the British expanded was all across the country. So political systems changed. The laws that the British made were applicable to everyone. So unification took place. The consciousness took place that we are part of one country, these are aliens, the Britishers, evict them. Socio-cultural awakening took place. The British started making laws like abolition of sati, the banning of the female infanticide, right? Consciousness amongst the Indians started, and then Indians also started their own cultural awakening movement. So that is why we actually call this as the modern Indian history. Okay, right, so that is separate. So regulation. Now, we were over here, this place, we find the British, British were concerned that our empire is owned in here. There are Marathas over here, very, very powerful. They can attack us anytime. There are Afghans somewhere over here, they can attack us anytime. We need to expand, we have to have more territories under their control. They wanted to have more territories also because the British wanted to make most of the territories of India. So after emergence and regulation, we come to the expansion, the phase of expansion of the British in India. And actually, that also resulted in, not intentionally actually for British, unification of this country. So expansion phase took place. So British started to rule over this entire territory. They defeated one kingdom after the other. And for this purpose, they also used a system of, what do we call that? Divide and rule? They used the Marathas against the Mysore, right? So like that, they used one against the other and got the entire India to itself. Okay, so the phase of expansion. Now, think about it, just pause over here, think about it. British bringing in their own system of administration. British government, their aim is to appropriate as many resources as possible and take them back to British. That was the goal. That was leading to grudges. These were leading to tensions. So there was a lot of resentment against the British. And this resulted in lot of uprisings. The most famous being the revolt of 1857, which is almost regularly being asked in the exam. Right, so uprisings and then the revolt of 1857. Okay, now very, very important event, and also it marked the 100 years of the British in India. 1757 Battle of Plassey, from if we take that as the parameter, 1757 to 1857. So kind of half of your modern India is being done. Okay, now British realizes there is resentment. We need to take certain corrective measures, right? So they start taking certain corrective measures. They feel that we should have more representation of Indians in the administration and the law making. So a phase emerged. In fact, this goes in parallel. So a phase emerged where the British were bringing in constitutional reforms. So gradually, over the years, next 90 years, from time to time, powers were being transferred from the British to Indians. Initially, it was representation of Indians in the Governor General's Council. Then a legislative council was created. In that, representation would be there. So that started to take place. Okay, so that constitutional reforms started to take place. This was going on in parallel. And this British rule overall, this created a class of Indians who benefited via the systems that were introduced by the British. Now, there was a class of professionals like lawyers, teachers who were teaching in the British schools, right? So there were people who were working in the administration. So all of them was there, which we can call them as the middle class intelligentsia. So they had emerged, who ultimately led the banner of India's freedom movement. But initially they were with the British, and they lobbied with the British government and requested them, please, prayer, plead, petition. They pleaded with them that please give us reforms, please give us more powers, more representation. So that was the idea. Okay, so this started to take place. So constitutional reforms, this keeps taking place in the meanwhile. Now this middle class intelligentsia eventually became to be known as the moderates. So they were moderates, then people were not happy with the methods of the moderates, then comes the extremists. And extremists were also not extreme enough, so then comes Mahatma Gandhi, who was most extreme of everyone. Okay, so Gandhian times come into picture. So Gandhian methods of freedom struggle emerge. We hear of satyagraha, we hear of obviously non-violence, non-violent methods, mass struggles, mass movement against the British, very different from the struggle that took place in revolt of 1857. In fact, the revolt of 1857 was kind of a learning for the Indians that the traditional means of fighting are not going to win wars. We want mass mobilization, mass struggle. So new struggle was developed, new method was developed by Gandhiji. Okay, so we learn about them, Gandhian methods, which includes the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, the individual satyagraha, so all this, and then Quit India movement. So all of that will be studied. Very, very important events. So this thing was there. Now, in the meantime, in this gap, like these events were taking place, but there were other people also. So there were other movements also taking place, like the revolutionary movements. Here of Bhagat Singh, right? So revolutionary movements, different phases of revolutionary movement. So that was there. So that was there, revolutionary movements, labor movements, labor union movements. Then there was activity that was going on the socio-cultural sphere, bringing in reforms in the society, bringing in reforms in the culture. So all of that. Okay, so all of that was taking place. Okay, so now we are back to Quit India movement. Look, a lot of things take place in parallel. Okay. Now, post Quit India movement, the British also realized it's not sustainable. There's a lot of movements are taking place against us. Might as well go back. The World War was going on. First World War already taking place 1914 to 1919, and then 1939 to 1945. The British needed the support of Indians also. There were talks of constitutional reforms. So we'll give you more reforms. You say reforms, but support us. Support us in our war activities. We'll give you. And Indians were not convinced. He said, please, quit India. We want complete Swaraj. We want Puri Swaraj. That was the demand. Now, sometimes to stall the process, the British would engage in separatist activities also. They were always divided rules. So, pit Hindus against the Muslims, or pit Muslims against the Indian National Congress. So that was going on. And eventually the demand for Pakistan also took place. Right, so the division or the partition of this country. So that basically concludes with the partition, with the passing of the Indian Independence Act. So with that, actually the syllabus of modern history concludes. And yes, there is also one more segment, that is India after independence, where normally your books cover till 1964. Right. So this is all we have. On this session, which is talking about the modern Indian history and introduction. Right then. So this is it. Bye bye. Take care and all the best.